All right. Welcome to the Neary Building Committee meeting. It is January 6th, 2025. It is 7:08 p.m. We have 4 of our 7 voting members present. We are a little light on the ex officio side tonight, just due to a conflict with the Northborough School Committee having to meet on Monday night this week due to the holiday last week. So they have split up to accommodate both meetings. So welcome Keith and Steve and Mark. So we are going to roll right into our agenda. First item is approval of meeting minutes from December 16th and 17th. These are not ready, so you didn't miss anything. 16th, Mariana is still preparing, and 17th, we are going to wait for the select board to vote their meeting minutes first, and then adapt those to fit ours. So if all goes well, the select board will vote on those tomorrow night, and then we will take that version and vote it as a Neary Building Committee next meeting.
Jason, may I ask a question about minutes? Do you recall which meeting of the Neary Building Committee that we approved the sustainability subcommittee minutes? Happen to recall it? I tried to check back through the agendas and I could not find it, but I just wonder if.
We typically don't do subcommittee minutes here unless there's a need to get them done. They're usually done in the subcommittee level.
Okay,
So that'll be your next agenda for the subcommittee
right.
and approve them. And if you need to just call a special meeting to get those minutes caught up, I would do it.
No, I think we'll be fine.
Okay. The next agenda item was, and I had circulated these prior to the last meeting, is the open session and executive session from April 9th of 2024. These have just kind of been lingering out there. It was a very quick meeting. We need to post open session meetings to denote that we called ourselves into session and adjourned to executive sessions and did not come back to open. That's the part that needs to be posted with the clerk. And then we do need to approve a set of executive session minutes, but the motion will not be to release those. And I don't think there's ever an intent to release those as part of that discussion. So did everyone have a chance to look at those previously and is ready to vote on those?
I'll give you a yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to make a motion to approve and release the open session meeting minutes from April 9th, 2024. And I'll denote that that was the AM meeting because there was a PM meeting. And to approve the executive session minutes.
To retain, right?
Yes.
I second that.
First, and if there were any changes, we would have to do that in executive session, so I'm okay,
Correct.
I'm okay with them.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Kathy?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. All right. Next is going to be community feedback and outreach plan. So the one item that I wanted to, well, I want to provide a few updates and then get some feedback from the committee. So over the last 2 weeks, so right before the holidays and more recently, we have done a series of tapings with both a combination of Sam in their studio with certain parts of our presentations that we've done. And then myself and the school administration team did a voiceover of the presentation we made to the select board and advisory in December. We've now recorded that to take any Q&A out of it and really just have a baseline presentation. So Greg is doing the fine tuning on that recording. So we expect to be able to release that pretty soon. And we will use that as a primer for anyone that's kind of showing up to the project and wanting to get quickly caught up to speed before going into kind of any of the finer details. And then I think the expectation is that we will continue to record very detailed segments related to I'll call it the hotter button issues of the project. So for example, when we have the next cost estimate, I would expect that some subsection of the finance subcommittee would do a full detailed presentation that could be recorded and replayed about the project finances, because they really wouldn't change from that time to the time we go to town meeting, because we wouldn't be doing any more cost estimating at that point once we get beyond the value engineering phase. And then we would do the same thing with, if additional items come up related to the site. There have been some questions that have come up around the educational plan and wanting even greater details around the benefits there. So something our school administration. So we do have those in motion. So that's just in FYI. And obviously, to the extent that you think there's a topic that needs to be recorded, certainly let me or the communications subcommittee know, and we'll facilitate who the right person is to be part of those recordings. And a huge thank you to Greg and his team for the time they've put in to date on this, but also to Terry and Southborough Access Media for some of the help they had facilitating, especially given trying to coordinate our calendars. So I'll pause on that to see Roger's hand up on the communication plan.
Just a quick question about when are we thinking we might expect the quote, at least final numbers for the time being to come out?
That's mid-February in line
Mid-February? Okay, thank you.
with the calendar.
February 5th is when we expect them. February 7th is when the finance subcommittee is going to meet to discuss those numbers and be ready to discuss that with the full committee the following week.
Thank you.
So, and I interpreted your
Uh,
question by ready to mean like once we've had a chance to digest them, react to them, and propose any changes. So I think by mid-February, we'd have a direction of where we're headed after those 3 meetings that Kathy referenced. So then the item I wanted some feedback on is, as a trial run, I've scheduled some initial office hours for this week to be taking place Friday at 9 a.m. I would think that we should never have more than 2 members present. I don't think there's a need to have, I mean, we can go up to 3 without creating a quorum, but just in terms of scheduling and logistics. So if anyone wants to join me, certainly let me know, but I'm also fine having the first one kind of solo. I do think to the extent that we have an ex officio member or two that happen to be available, it never hurts, especially on the education side. So kind of looking at Keith and Steve a little bit there, because I do think the educational policy related questions are much better answered by all of you and not us, because we are not educational professionals. And I think, we are seeing some of those questions start to come out too, which is good. And certainly a key part of this overall project. What I want the feedback from the committee on is how frequently we should be doing these. And obviously, attendance will certainly guide some of that over time, but at least to start, when we should be doing them other than during daytime hours and some evening ones, and whether we want to include a few weekend sessions.
The first one is this Friday at 9 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct. I reserved the public safety building training room for that.
All right, so I want to join you on that one, the first one.
Okay.
And I realize you've asked another question, but how are you going to publicize that?
I plan to put out a parent square notice through our Neary. I'm going to put it on Facebook, and then I'll ask Craig and his team to put it in their normal communication, and then naturally that will go to the blog as well. Roger, it may be we can think about a way to get it to Pam too, and let her print something and post it at the senior center as well.
I think that'd be good.
And Mark, can we put it up on the front page of the town site?
Sure.
The little, that little
Yep.
scrolling thing.
Yeah, just send me something. We'll get that up.
All right, I'll do that after the meeting tonight.
Okay.
So,
Jason,
good, Steve.
could I just add that if you have that notice that you're going to send to Mark, if you send that to principals, we can also deliver that through Parent Square also pretty easily. All families and school age children would get the same notice.
Perfect. We'll do that. Sorry, Chris is still trying to get in. All right, so then I guess query how often we should do it after this week, assume that it gets attendance. Every other week, monthly, weekly.
More than monthly, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly weekly is too much, I think.
Yeah, so something in between weekly and monthly.
Every other week would get us to 2 a month. We only have 4 months to go.
And I think maybe trying to find some community events that we can dovetail with. I don't have any off the top of my head, but trying to think of ones where people will be at that we can get a table or something.
I think if you target every other week, you miss one now and then, okay, it's still doesn't miss a whole month, right? So I think if you're targeting every other week, since Jason, as you said, only have 4 months, I mean, you know, might be the best interval to shoot for.
The 9 o'clock, I think, sounds good, maybe even 8:45. I don't know what time schools start. I don't know what
The last one starts at between 8:55 and 9:10. That's Finn.
perfect, because if, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the best attended session we've had so far was the Finn Coffee, maybe?
It was by far and away.
Yeah, and
It
that
probably
happened,
equaled the attendance of everything else combined.
right after the drop off, right? So it was convenient for people to drop off their kids and come right in. So I think that this is a good time to start. I just hope we get it out soon enough that people see it.
Yeah, and obviously open office hours, you don't necessarily want 50 people either.
Yeah.
To try to, encourage, sort of one-on-one sort of, or two-on-one. I mean, Kathy, you've hosted more of these than you probably, as a select board level. So,
No one
I,
ever comes to ours.
yeah. So I assume we want some evening hours as well.
Yep, for those who work.
And what about, trying for a few weekends?
I think you're trying your best to pick up everybody's situation, right? Those that work, those that don't work, those that both work.
Okay. So I'll float some dates, and if everyone can even just volunteer for one, I think we get pretty far along.
Jason, just one other idea. Andrew had mentioned something about dovetailing onto already established events. I know that at our open houses at the beginning of the year, Roger had a table set up at Woodward, and I know others were at other schools. It might make sense to do something on the nights of parent conferences. Those are evening events. I wonder if you want to have a table in each of the lobbies, so that way parents coming and going can have an opportunity to interact. Just a thought. That's a 2 hour window. And there's typically a lot of parents attend those evening conferences.
That's March. I should know this, right? But it's March,
Yeah,
right?
and yeah, end of March.
Okay. So that will be prime time for when we're really trying to solidify our messaging, and there's going to be no new information at that point. It should be what our proposal is. So that's good. Obviously, I know efforts in the past have gone on at the transfer station. It's obviously a very cold time of year to be there. Um,
Oh,
But I will tell you and Keith can attest to this, the gyms on Saturdays honestly Sundays are packed with basketball right now. And it circles through every hour in terms of the participation. Obviously, you do get some repeats with repeat kids, but that is an idea where you're out of the way, but can naturally engage as well. It is a little chaotic though, being someone that attends that.
but Jason, your transfer station idea is a really good one. As you guys may or may not know, Sam's Diver sits up there every Saturday in good weather, and he gets a lot of business. I go up there sometimes to sit with him, and they aren't in a hurry. And they do come over and talk to you. So I think once the weather gets a little bit better and we can stand it, that might be a good idea, maybe in April, to try to see if we can do a couple Saturdays up there.
Yeah, back in public safety days, we picked the 4 coldest days of that entire year to stand out there.
Really.
So all right. So I guess if anyone thinks of other ideas, and Steve, thank you for your contributions, and Keith, as you become aware of others too. And we shouldn't forget about Trotter in Algonquin, because Algonquin's a little more difficult with the fact that at least 60% of that's probably don't care about this project, but there are parents there that certainly would care about it as Southborough taxpayers. All right, so I will circulate that on the open office hours. The only other FYI is Andrew and I did hold a Zoom last night for the kinder group, which is obviously families predominantly kids that have not entered the Southborough schools or still have kids that have not entered the Southborough schools. They may have some that have started in terms of the age population. So very different line of questionings than you typically hear with most of our other public meetings we've had. And we're doing another similar session on Thursday night.
With kindergarten.
So if anyone becomes aware of any other groups that are interested in that, certainly let us know. I know Roger is doing the same with the seniors as new data becomes available, but there's obviously other groups that may be interested. So certainly always happy to hear about those as well. All right. Any other questions on that?
Yeah, we had pretty good participation. What do we have? I didn't get the final count, but maybe like what, 15 people?
It was 26 logged in. That
Wow.
included us, obviously. A few dual parents, same last name showed up
Yep.
on the screen, but not too many.
So you did it via Zoom for the kinder group, so anybody
Mhm.
can Zoom in?
Yeah.
So Andrew, how many are in kinder group these days?
Well, I'd have to look at the roster. I have it somewhere. I'll look it up and tell you in a minute.
I would say that's a key constituency.
Yes, very much so. The largest group of people whose kids will be able to immediately.
Absolutely.
All right. Good evening, Arrow Street and Skanska.
Greetings all. Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Evening.
Almost have everyone from the Arrow Street team here. I keep moving around on my screen. Who needs screen sharing?
Could you bring Andrew Plum over and give him screen share?
I can. I tried to bring Kate over. I was unsuccessful thus far.
Okay.
So Kate, if you want to come over at any point, just raise your hand. Oh, there she is. So we have 3 items in this particular section tonight. Actually 2. HVAC system recommendation from the Sustainability Subcommittee and Design Review Update Exterior. Which order do you want to go in?
We're going to do the design review first.
Okay. So Andrew should have screen share. If anyone else needs it along the way, let me know.
Okay, I will share. Hopefully that's showing up.
It's coming. There you go. We're up.
We're up. Okay, great. All right. So as we know, we're going to start with the design updates. Just a quick look at the state of the floor plans, and then we'll talk a little bit more in depth about our current thinking on exterior materials and sort of massing. And then after that is complete, we'll move on to the Sustainability Subcommittee update. So this is a updated first floor plan, and just a couple of things to point out. We've been working mostly on clarifying the relationship of the cafeteria, kitchen, back of house, stage, and music room. Lots of little bits and pieces here to work out so that we get a efficient and useful layout that works for all the various parties involved. So it's not something to go into too much depth tonight, but just to point out that we've been working through that. One of the things that we are looking at is whether perhaps the wall between the large music room and the stage should be operable or not. And we're doing some internal studies about how much seating and arrangements can be on the stage. And we're going to be just reviewing that with Greg and his team to get their feedback before finalizing it. Let's see, we're also, the classroom bars and learning commons is largely where you saw it last. At the top page north top here, we've been doing some reconfiguration. Some things have been shifting around just in that area regarding the stair, staff toilet, resource rooms, etc. Probably will continue to push and pull a little bit in the in the few days we've got left before we send this off to the cost estimator. Up on the second floor.
Actually, Andrew, I'm
Yep.
sorry to interrupt you. The gym, also, there had been a question about the practice courts. So we have dashed in, I don't know if you want to zoom into that a little bit. The practice courts are shown there. And you can see the bleachers pulled, both pulled out and also retracted. Just if anyone is curious about how the practice courts fit within the overall gym.
These are the bleachers here.
Katie, were you able to check the size of the marathon school one?
I don't have the marathon school specifically. Are you curious about a specific dimension or about league play or?
Mostly I was there the other day. I think they built it at the same, 6,000 square feet, but there's barely enough room to have like a chair on each side of the court. And so I was just kind of, I assume that the court is smaller or something is different, but it was just kind of, I wanted to make sure that before we built it and something was weird, that it seems strange that for the same size square footage, they can fit one chair on either side and basically you're inbounding the ball while sitting on somebody's lap. And we could fit, 5 or 6 rows of bleachers.
If you know how I can get a hold of those plans, I could take a look and compare.
I'll take a look. I think they still have their building. They just filled it a couple years ago. So I think the building committee website's still up. I'll send it to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, sorry. Just,
Go on.
Okay, and then I wanted to just point out on the second floor, we are now showing at the request of the district a second art room, and wanted to just talk through where that's located. So we've got basically the 2 art rooms are co-located, able to share a common kiln space, and located on the left-hand side of the media center, which is sort of occupying this sort of more central position of the overall building mass. And so one of the key questions, of course, is whether or not we should proceed with that or go back to the single art room. But wanted to show that here to see if there were any questions about this approach.
And if I can just chime into, an option would be to carry this as a deduct alternate when we send it to the estimators in a couple weeks. So we could keep it in, and then if depending on where the cost estimate comes back at, we could make that determination at that point. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, Katie, this would be fairly straightforward to peel out, correct? Out of the floor plan?
It would just be that we would have to change the massing a little bit. And that's a little bit, little rework there before we're submitting the SD. So if we were able to know sooner rather than later, that would be great. But if it is a discussion that needs to continue, we could do it before we submit SD.
So can you reiterate what we're talking about deducting?
There are 2 art rooms shown currently. The educational plan, as it had been previously submitted, showed 1 single art room. I believe that Greg and his folks have determined since then that a second art room would benefit. It is allowed in the MSBA spreadsheet to have 2, so it should be reimbursable. But it does change the total square footage of the building. It would be within the reimbursable category, but it would change the overall. So we just want to know if there's a final answer on whether or not we should include it.
So, Katie, I'm not comfortable that we have this. This is not on our agenda for tonight. You specifically said exterior, so that's what's on the agenda. So my suggestion would be, if you have not spoken to Greg or a member of his team about this, I think you need to go back and talk to them. And then if the recommendation is still if there's still support to keep this in here from the school administration, I think the committee's going to need to discuss this at a later point in time, or you're going to need to cost it two different ways and give us an option as part of the cost estimating. But we're not in a position tonight to deliberate whether they should stay in or out. But I think you have an easier path of talking to the school administration, because I know they were thinking about it based on the feedback that the committee provided last time when this was proposed.
Okay, I hadn't spoken to Greg since the last meeting to know if anything had changed on his end, so I can follow up with him. We can include it as a deduct alternate. I was, yes, again, just hoping that there was something sooner, but we can absolutely address it that way.
Katie, how many square feet did it add?
It would go from currently we have
99,564 is what,
correct, and it would go to 101,064.
101's what? Zero six?
101,064.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Keith.
Katie, when you guys were investigating the additional space for the second art room, were there any other places where we could absorb that space and reduce space, whether it be the media center or some other spot, so that square footage number wasn't just the full delta of a new room?
Well, the rest of the spaces are trying to meet the space summary as we've spelled it out to the MSBA. They're pretty particular about meeting the square footages that we've told them that they are required. So we're trying not to take it out of any of the other spaces. Then other than that, it's really just the net to gross. And that takes into account all the corridors, the mechanical spaces, some of the others. So it really should be counted as a legitimate space of its own. Obviously, we're continuing to work on the net to gross to try and bring that number within reason. We're always trying to make that, reduced as possible, but we don't want to take it out of any of the other educational spaces.
Yeah, I see. And so as it's shown here, is that is not simply double what it was, correct? Is there a little bit of it's not a full ×2 for what that space was. Is that correct?
It's two separate rooms that are the same size. So yes, it is double. It's
So
two
so
rooms
the
that are
original art room was the existing one to the right. Now the additional art room is the one to the left. That's correct.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so we are going to move on from this topic. We are not making a decision tonight. We will present options if the school administration still believes it needs to go forward, and we'll move on to the exterior part.
Okay, so moving on to the exterior part of the discussion. I just wanted to include this slide as a reminder of the last time we talked about this. This was the slide that we had shown, which was calling out the sort of idea that the majority of the building we were thinking would be best suited to be done in masonry, and then perhaps treating this sort of central connector piece as something a little bit different. And that's sort of what we had led with the last time. And then we are now updating our thinking. We've been sort of refining our thinking since then. And so I'm just want to walk you guys through the current sort of ideas, which is that we have, and I'm going to turn on my pencil here. We have the there's sort of 5 primary volumes to the overall building, and that is the sort of 2 classroom bars, the gym element, and the sort of music and 1, 2, 3, 6. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. The music and cafeteria volume, and then the art and media element that is sort of this connector piece that I was referring to. And what we are developing is that the classrooms, gym, music, cafeteria are all masonry elements, and that we treat the arts and media piece as something that is different than that. And so therefore it's in a different material. And so what we wanted to just show is that a couple of possible ways that could play out here on the right of the screen. These 2 images are looking at ways of using like a metal panel material that would be a contrast to the masonry of the other elements. And the reason we like that is that because this arts and media element is sort of present at the entry on all sides of the building, which I'll sort of show you some more views of. But the sort of front door to the new school is sort of very prominently displaying the arts and media element above, and it will do a lot to kind of set the tone and character of the building. But it also is something that you will see from the two side entries and also from the courtyard as well. Here's the courtyard view there. And so I want to just kind of talk through some of our thinking of the how the brick might play out. And I'll go to the next slide for that. I can clear my drawings. So I was reading through the written narrative history of Southborough, and it was interesting to learn that the bedrock that's underneath all of Southborough is this calcareous gneiss, which is kind of like a granite. And it has this is an example image of that. And we were kind of interested in maybe thinking about the color palette of this and the kind of pattern of this as a way of anchoring the character of the new building to Southborough and to something that's just really literally of the land of Southborough. And so this is just a study that we were doing where we were taking this image of this example stone and saying, well, if we were working with brick, how much that be something that we bring to the character of the school. And so we were thinking about a color palette of sort of darker tones ranging up to lighter tones, and that perhaps those could be used to help define these different pieces of the overall school, the classroom bars, the gym, the cafeteria, et cetera. And this blend study that's here on the right is a way of taking, for example, 3 of those tones and potentially blending from one to the next, which is an affordable way to take something that's using the brick that is a very kind of value conscious choice of material because it's affordable and durable, but adding some character without adding lots of complicated masonry detailing. So this is sort of instead using a blend patterning to go from one color to the next. And we've kind of tested that out on the next couple slides to show you, but it's a way of working with a simple material in a simple way, but getting a more rich kind of outcome out of it. And so that's where the kind of thinking of this blend is coming from. And so here you'll see a diagram. This is the overall massing of the building again. And this idea of perhaps there being a range of lighter to darker brick tones, which is coming from this indigenous stone color palette. And potentially using this blend idea where each of these pieces of the building, these primary pieces of the building have some color that's mostly their own, but also share some of the others. So there's this kind of way of stitching together the overall feel of the building while still making the gym part feel unique and the classroom part feel unique. And then in the middle of all this is the connector piece, which is the art and media bar, which would have not masonry, but a different material. We're thinking something like a metal panel that would have potentially a more vertical pattern to it that would work with the windows and would be a contrast to the more horizontal patterning that's naturally going to come up with the masonry. And so this diagram that you see at the bottom here is really just about showing how we might start to take some ideas of brick color and brick pattern and assign it to these different blocks, and that how the art and media bar might start to set up this entry court that is the sort of front door of the new school. And so here's one study of just kind of playing this out. And I want to just point out that this is really just a first study. It's just a first pass. And, this is we will do many and look at this many different ways, but we wanted to share our thinking about it. So here you can see this idea of the masonry on the gym volume and the music and cafeteria volume on the left and right, the art and media piece being a contrasting element, and how that can sort of work to kind of announce the front door of the building. And you can see how the brick blend idea, potentially helps to have the different volumes relate to each other without actually having to match each other exactly. So this view is sort of that entry view. And then if I go to the next slide, this is looking at the side entry. So this is the side of the gym. And you're seeing on the left-hand side here, the classroom bar. And this entry element here would be where you're arriving from the school bus or car drop-off. So this entry and the prior one are the two sort of primary ways that people are entering and leaving the building throughout the day. And so this sort of combination of this art and media bar and another material here at the level of where you're actually entering the building is something that helps to kind of announce this is a place where you come in and out of the building. And perhaps we do something with the material there that feels a little bit more approachable to a child, something that's more human scaled and a little bit more feels good to touch, as opposed to just the masonry that might be present everywhere else. And so that's sort of how we're been developing the thinking about the relationship between the volumes of the building, the massing, and the materials that are starting to define them, and then how we can use that to define, like, where's the front door, where do you come and go from the building, and how do we give some real character to the place that feels rooted in Southborough, but also is done in an economical way. And that's the last slide, I think, of the exterior update. So happy to take any questions on that piece before moving on.
Questions on the exterior side? Go ahead, Kathy.
So I don't have a question. I just make a quick comment. So I love that color palette, the light to the dark. I love those colors. Just as a general rule, this looks pretty busy to me. So we have to play it out, I guess. But I think that how creative to look at a stone that's common to South. I'm not sure many would appreciate it though. But I think that I love that color palette as far as maybe the basis for doing this. So just a comment.
Thank you.
Any other comments in the exterior before we go to sustainability? All right. I'm turning it to Kate.
Okay, I'm gonna actually let Katie share her screen for this part, so I'm gonna stop sharing.
Should be all set, Katie.
Go. And Kate, I will present the screen if you would like to give us a recap for the subcommittee, or Roger, I'm not sure who's best.
Well, I guess I would just quickly summarize by saying that we actually spent some time, probably more detail than we will spend tonight. And I think we're pretty much all agreed, along with Arrow Street, where we've ended up here, especially because of the incentives that are offered on the ground source approach. So, Chris, I know you were at the meeting. If you wanted to add anything before Katie or Kate, moves forward on this, please feel free.
No, Raj, I think what you said is correct. It's the ground source seems like it makes the most sense with the incentives and future utility cost, and just the fact the infrastructure we get with either ground source or If we do have to go air source and the maintenance piece as well, it just all makes sense that we proceed with ground source as option 1, and option 2 would be air source. Kind of what we originally stated from the beginning. I think I don't think anything has changed its course since our original selections.
And clearly the incentives, make the huge difference in the end. That's all I got.
Do we want to run, Kathy, is your hand still up from the last time or is that new?
No.
Okay. Go ahead, then we're gonna run through, like Kate run through the presentation and then come back to kind of the rationale for where they've concluded.
So my first comment is, if you guys, I know Chris Evers knows the stuff from backwards forward, but I don't know what EUI is. I don't know what VRF is. So instead of using acronyms, if you could explain what they are, that'd be helpful. But more importantly, it sounds like the decision to recommend the option 2, I assume, is based in some significant part on the perceived financial incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act. And remember, we don't get those checks until the system is placed in service, which we think is 2028. We've got a new president who is threatening to take these incentives away. I don't know if he's going to get it done or not. I don't know if he really means it or not. But we're counting on something that is certainly not a done deal. But regardless of whether we get them or not, when we go to town meeting, Jason, check me on this. When we go to town meeting, we're going to have to add that extra $6 million, whatever, to the total cost up front, and get the bond approved up front. That includes this. So we are significantly increasing the perceived cost of this project by approving option 2.
So I don't disagree with anything you said, Kathy. I think you're absolutely correct. I would ask maybe Arrow Street to walk through kind of the math on this and anything else that is relevant in terms of how we think about this, both short term and long term. And then I think we can take these numbers and figure out what it does to kind of the upfront, what's at risk. And I think it's also important if, and I don't know if this is a Jim question or an Arrow Street question, how these numbers compare to what you were carrying in the cost estimate to begin with. Because I know we did have that add-on geothermal option at one point. So I think it would just be helpful to look at it that way and then understand, obviously, what may change as part of the updated cost estimating. So I don't know if Kate wants to run through anything in detail in the slides before we get to that, but I think that would probably be important background for us to all that be at least level set on.
Yep. So we looked at 3 options of the same 3 options that we priced at the last phase at the PSR. And we talked about them in June as well. They're only in this option of, are in this order of 1, 2, and 3, because BRF is the lowest construction cost. And so that's the only reason why that's 1. And then we compared option 2 and 3 to the BRF option. BRF stands for variable refrigerant frequency or flow. And basically it's similar to option 3 in that it's using the air as the heat transfer to create, heating and cooling in this space. Option 2 is a ground source system. So it's geothermal well field that's using the ground as the heat transfer. And then option 3 is, again, similar to option 1 in that it's using the air as a heat transfer, but it's air to water as opposed to option 1, which is taking an air to refrigerant. So that's sort of the main difference between 1 and 3 at a very high level. And then the other distinguishing difference between the 3 options is that option 1 can only be used with what's called overhead ventilation. So that's your, supply register in the ceiling that you've seen probably in most buildings, other than isn't common in homes, but in office buildings and other public spaces, where options 2 and 3 do what we call displacement ventilation. And that just means that the supply register where the air is coming out is on the wall, and it's lower in the space. So it comes out in the breathing zone. And then the heat of the equipment and people helps stratify that air, and it gets exhausted up high. And in terms of what the EUI is, that's the energy use intensity. It's just a measurement like miles per gallon for your car. EUI is the amount of energy that's used per square foot and allows us to compare different systems and different types of buildings to each other. And so for net zero, you're looking at efficiency and then using renewables for the energy. So that efficiency part is setting an EUI or an energy factor of 25. As if you're 25 or less, you're the most efficient that you can be. And so that's what that means. And option 2 is the only one, it is the most efficient system. So it's the only one that hits that energy use of 25 or less. But the other ones are also very efficient, just not quite as efficient. So if you go to the next slide, this is just one of the summary slides from the life cycle cost assessment that we did with GGD, the MEP engineer. We had looked at 3 components to the systems. We looked at the qualities, the benefits, if you will, of the different systems, from the indoor air quality, the thermal comfort, those are the environmental factors. Also the maintenance and the ease of maintenance, those are other qualities we looked at. We looked at the cost, that's a section in the middle. What does it cost to operate and maintain each of the systems, the energy use and utility costs, the maintenance costs, replacing filters and all those routine maintenance, as well as the lifetime replacement, like how often does the equipment majorly have to be replaced throughout the life of the building. And this is a 50-year study that we looked at. The life of the building will be longer than 50 years, but for the study, that's what we looked at. And then the last section on the right is looking at what's the capital investment cost of each system, what types of incentives are there. And so there's 3 columns there. There's the capital investment with no incentives. There's the capital cost with mass save incentives. And then towards the right-hand side, there's a one that says all incentives, and that's the mass save, the state incentive as well as the federal incentive. And so that's looking at what's the payback over that 50-year lifespan. Is there a payback? And if so, what is it? And so the cost and ROI section is kind of color coded. So you can see green means it's positive, meaning the cost is the least cost compared to the 3 systems. And then red would be it's the most expensive to operate of the 3 systems, and yellow is in between. And then on the ROI, again, green is the least expensive. So it's the best cost or the lowest cost for capital investment. Red is the highest, yellow is in between. And then you can see that a payback is achieved for only the ground source system and only in the 3rd scenario of factoring all the incentives, the state and the federal incentives, and that's an instant payback. As opposed to being 5 or 10 years, it's actually at year 1.
There are other slides you want to walk through on this, or do you want to pause on this slide?
Yeah, so we mainly just have this slide, and I can go into details line by line like we did with the subcommittee, but I thought it would be better to see if anybody had any specific questions.
I do on this slide. I don't have to go first, but I do have questions on this one.
I'm going to go to you two. I just want to ask just a framing question, Kathy, then I'll let you go to details. Sticking with some of Kathy's comments earlier, I guess if we were to focus on the capital investment component of this and forget about any sort of incentives, I think what we're suggesting is at least the recommended system is $3.6 million higher up front, not 6. Is that correct?
Compared to the lowest cost system, yes.
Yes.
So the 8.3 for VRF is the lowest, and then option 2, the ground source, is 11.9.
Okay. So Jim, or Arrow Street, what was budgeted in the cost estimate that we've been working with to date for HVAC in general?
So I would just have to pull up the.
I've got it, Jim, in front of me. It's 8 million.
Okay. Thank you.
8 point what, Kathy?
Call it 8.9.
So 600K greater than the lowest option on the page.
Yes, these are new estimates. These are the SD estimates for these 3 systems. And so the VRF was the system that was in the base estimate at the last phase, and ground source and air source were add alternates to that. And so that's why the numbers are a little bit different. I think you said 8.6, Kathy, and now it's 8.3.
Nice. So it's $3 million more, Kate, as far as what's in the estimate, 3 million, almost exactly.
Okay. All right. So then just another clarifying question, and then Kathy, I'll go to you. Is the annual energy cost that we're seeing on the page, I'll just pick the 174 because that's the option that at least is being recommended for discussion here tonight. That is related to the energy system, that is related to the HVAC system, or is that for the whole building based on the size?
It's just the HVAC system. So that would be your electric bill to National Grid. You can think about it that way, the 174.5.
But what about like the lights in the building or the power, like the?
Yeah, so everything. So
Everything.
every energy use.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's, sorry. Yes, it's not just the HVAC system,
Okay.
right? That's your total electric use.
Okay. All right.
And that's
Thank you for
heat
that
and AC, right?
Yes, that's heating, that's cooling. That's what we call plug loads, everything you plug in, your security system, your lighting. There's a plug in there for kitchen equipment, things like that, everything, anything that needs energy, hot water.
Okay. That, Kathy, I'll go to you.
So Kate, sticking on that, column 3, annual savings of 5313, where does that come from?
So that is the savings compared to the first line, the VRF. So VRF is option 1 because it's the lowest capital cost. And then we're comparing option 2 to it and comparing option 3 to it. And so the savings is the difference between how much annual energy savings. So that's the 215 in red versus the 174, as well as the annual maintenance of 63,000 versus 53,000. So that annual savings is total to that 50,313. So it's utility annual energy savings and it's the annual maintenance savings compared to option 1.
Okay, so so if we choose option 2, right? As far as what we've got to add to the gross cost, we've got to add $3 million. We agree? Everybody agree as far as what our current estimate is? Jim?
That's correct. Yep.
Add $3 million. We know we're going to increase the incentive points by 2, because right now we've got 2 built in. We think we can get 4, right? So we're going to get 2 more incentive points, right? We're going to get 5 instead of 3. We got 3 built into the estimate, right?
So you're talking
Correct.
for the green program. So it's
Yeah,
it's a total of 4.
right. So we've got 2, Kate, built into the estimate that we've been using so far. So we'll get 2 more, right? Instead of 4, we got 2. We were being
Correct.
conservative.
And just to be clear, those are regardless of which system you pick here, we'll look at the 4 because it doesn't matter which system, it just matters that the system is electric and these are all electric to just.
Okay, so to do the math, we basically would factor in using 5, right, Jim, instead of 3. We'd add $3 million of cost. And the delta in those 2 would be what the net increase to the cost would be that we've got to get approved.
So just to clarify, it tops out at 4 incentive points.
Right, but we got 1, we're gonna go from, we've got 3 built into the projection, which includes the 1 for the maintenance, right? So we got 3 built in, 2 for.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, I understand. You're factoring in the
That's
maintenance.
what's in the
Gotcha.
30. I got the 3011 over my other screen. So we got 3
Yep.
built in, we go to 5. So to understand the impact of this cost-wise, as far as what town meeting has to approve, we've got to add $3 million because we've got to get town meeting to approve the gross cost of the project, right? Before the grant from the MSBA. Is that right still? Even though MSBA is going to vote on April 30th, we can't take that into account when we vote on May 10th. We've got to actually have the total gross cost approved.
That is correct.
Okay, that makes no sense to me. They approved the grant. Why on earth do you have to do that? So for another day, so we're going to have to add $3 million to what we think is a gross cost right now, which is $110 million. So we're up to 113 if we do this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I'm done, Jason.
Hey, Roger.
Kate, could you speak again? I know we spoke about this in the subcommittee meeting and I think you mentioned it preliminarily in your discussion tonight about the payback time for this option 2, when it would be,
Right.
when it would pay back.
So if you looked at the scenario where you're factoring all the incentives, it would be an instant payback. So in year 1 or the start of year 1, you would already be recouping savings. You'd only be seeing savings versus if you had gone with the least expensive option, which is the VRF. And that's because you can see all those 4 green boxes in the cost section for option 2. And then you see that the negative is that it costs the most, right? So it's that 11.9 million, it's red. And so over the 50 years, all of that annual savings that you're getting still wouldn't result in a payback within 50 years. It might be year 65. We didn't actually run it out that far to see when that happens. And that's with just looking at the capital investment. That's why it says no in red next to 11.9. And it isn't until you factor in the incentives that bring the cost down to that 7.779. That's where that cost is actually lower than any of the other costs for the other systems. And so that's why you're instantly getting savings, because not only are you getting savings annually for the operations and maintenance, but the capital cost is actually lower as well.
Right, so there's really not a payback discussion. It's already less, and then on top of that,
It's already less.
$50,000 a year. So it's already at least if we get the incentives, it's already the least expensive, and then on top of that, you get $50,000 a year in operating cost savings.
Correct. And I know that the subcommittee, the second preferred option was actually the air source heat pump, which is the mid cost. And so if you also look at that, even if you just looked at it with the mass save incentive, if you didn't factor in the federal incentive, it is still almost 1.4 higher. But that's another thing to think about. If you're not doing the ground source, if air source is the second option, the increase between those systems is actually, it's not 3, it's half of that. But of course, you're looking at it, Kathy, or you're asking like, what's the difference versus the last estimate, and that would still be 3.
All right, Andrew?
Couple questions. First is just to clarify, there is no option available for non-electric heat, right? Or HVAC.
Correct.
Okay. I think we should have, that might be a good FAQ thing when this comes out. The other one is probably for Keith. It would be good to know like what the annual energy and maintenance would be for like existing Neary and maybe even Finn, just to, if we could see if there's any kind of benefit to having a more efficient system or whatever it would be. From when we explain this, obviously it doesn't change the cost, but just from the sales pitch.
Yeah,
We've done some
we did
preliminary investigation on that, Andrew. Katie, did you put that into any other different type of analysis from what I gave to you last week?
Keith, I'm just going to interrupt you there. Greg wants to do a full presentation of all the operational savings, so
Okay.
This will be part of that, but I know there's obviously some staffing part of that as well.
Understood.
Yeah, we can cover it off in another meeting.
Yeah, we'll have a meeting on that, Andrew. It's absolutely an important question.
Yep. And then the last one's probably a long shot, but I saw the other day that Framingham is doing a neighborhood geothermal, and they got like $8 million grant from the federal government to do it, and they're working with Eversource on it. Is there any way we could do something like that and include Trottier and I don't know, a few houses on Parkerville or something, and try to package this up into that Department of Energy neighborhood geothermal?
So I'm not familiar with a specific grant that would fund something like that, but just in terms of how geothermal works in a district system. So district systems only work when there's diversity of use. So what that means is, say this building needs 25 wells and another building needs 25 wells. If that other building needs energy in a different way, so meaning different times of the day or different times of the year, you could potentially, instead of having 50 wells, you might have 45 wells. And so then there is some savings of a reduction of wells. So this being compared or paired with another school wouldn't change the amount of wells. If each school needed X number of wells, they would still need X number of wells. So there's no efficiency in cost of reduction of the well field. And then every building has its own equipment inside the building, the actual mechanical equipment that distributes that plant energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it was more like even if it needed 50 wells, the they would help pay for some of the wells. I think Chris, you understood it more than I did, but
Yeah, so that was a pilot project, and also a lot of the buildings that the infrastructure supplied were either Framingham owned operated or state owned operated facilities. So if Southborough were to do something like that, they would have to own maintaining the plant, the infrastructure, and the system and downstream system. I don't think we are set up to do that right now, and from a staffing standpoint. That Framingham project was a pilot rollout, and it fed all Massachusetts or Framingham ran properties. Like Katie said, different usages in each building. And alone, if you put more wells at Neary, the infrastructure cost to run the piping up to Trottier would outweigh itself to just put wells outside of Trottier to supply their own geothermal heat cool.
And as always with MSBA, that would get complicated because we'd have scope within the project that was serving something outside of what the scope of the agreement we have with MSBA is. So they'd likely deduct their reimbursement accordingly.
Cool. Figured I'd take a shot in the dark.
The only question I had to wrap up on the incentives, if Arrow Street could weigh in on timelines from other projects, like how soon I know the process starts at the beginning of the project, the submissions to the state, Mass Save, etc. Does Mass Save release any cash flow during the project, or is it all? I know we have the post occupancy commissioning / verification check-in. That's an additional round of refunds, but is there any, at what time in the project do these really kick in?
So these are all reimbursements at the end of construction, or in case of the federal, they use placed in service, which sometimes is slightly after construction, after some of the commissioning is complete, but it's essentially after construction. So they're just reimbursements. There isn't anything that's given at the end of, say, the design phase. But there are multiple steps to the Mass Save, and I went over this a little bit in December at the NBC meeting. Was you get the bulk of the money at the end of construction, and that's for designing and building to the requirements, and then you get a verification incentive, which is another. It's on the next. Oh, actually, it's not on the next slide. It's another. I think it's another $1 a square foot, and that's after you say, "Look, we've been operating for 12 months, and we are hitting that EUI, that energy number." You get an additional amount of money. So that's the only thing that comes in phases, but it's all after construction, nothing during the design.
And so if we go with option 1, 2, or 3, does that post construction is that available for all 3 or just geothermal?
It's only, so actually, let's go to the next slide. I put the summary of the incentives. We talked about this in December, but I was still using the PSR phase because we didn't have all the new estimates in this LCCA done. So these numbers are slightly different, but this is where both the federal, that's the first line across, and then Mass Save, the second line across. This is the incentives today based on the new energy modeling and the new cost estimates. And so a big difference of the incentive for the Mass Save of why you see the 1.268 on the left and then the 358 for the VRF. That is a function of the heat pump adders, but it's also a function of the verification incentive. So the verification incentive is not as high for the VRF option because it can't hit that 25 EUI. It's in a different path.
Katie, in the number you've got here, different than the previous slide, the 6606?
It is slightly different because the LCCA, when we do that, we don't include that verification incentive. So that's why the number is a little bit different because the verification incentive is not included in that when we do the LCCA. We're basically looking at it from just the, at the end of construction, what the incentive you would get at that point.
Well, then the verification incentive is almost the whole thing from SAFE?
No, the verification incentive
0.7?
is,
Go back to your previous slide with the three number. Yeah, so you got 7.7 there. So then now go to the next one. So it's 1.1, you got 1.2, so the whole thing is almost verification, right?
let me just open up the backup one second.
Kathy, it might be also good to calculate the interest on the carrying cost of the incentive dollar. Right, because we're paying up front. And then we have to wait till it comes in, which we're gonna have to bond, which we're paying interest on that, right?
Yeah, I fully support option 2, but it just makes that upfront cost more, makes it harder to, people will lose all the details and all the nuances that is here, $3 more million. But Katie, I don't think your numbers tie out. I'm sorry. That 6.6 doesn't look like 7.7 as far as. So just check them. You don't have to do it right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why it's.
The 7899 looks right for the VAR. But the 7.7 does not look right. 7.7 versus 6.6, unless the whole mass say.
The other one was 7.7, where this is 6066 with the incentive.
Yeah, I mean, the verification incentive is only 159,000. So that's not why. I will go back and check that.
Because if this one's right, it gets better.
I'll take it.
I don't think it's in that direction, but.
All right, so.
All right, Andrew, the new hand.
Oh yeah, I think the only other question I had was, does this factor in any solar scenarios or initiatives? In terms of like mostly the annual cost.
So right now it doesn't. But the utility costs will go down if you obviously are using renewables. So if you did a power purchase agreement, which I think we've talked very high level about solar, and it seems like that's the preferred option because there's zero costs for installation and you're paying the utility costs to the PPA provider. We see that savings usually around 6 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So that would be somewhere around 50,000 to maybe 75,000 savings per annual utility.
Okay, cool.
We did run a quick scenario on the 6 cent saving, and that doesn't get to like a payback year at just say like the mass save incentive. So it really doesn't change the previous table. The utility cost will be lower, but it won't change like the payback.
Yeah, it just helps us save money.
Right.
Kathy?
So a caution when Greg and Keith and team try to do the operational cost, and we heard this at the December 17th meeting of the select board, be careful about trying to do this in a vacuum and ignore the cost of FEN because it won't be a school anymore. So you got to make sure you're doing apples to apples as far as truly what the savings are. Are you going to get somebody on the select board who's gonna raise his hand and say you can't ignore Finn because the town is the town, school's part of the town, you can't separate the school from the town. So taxes are taxes. So just be careful about how you do that, Keith, to make sure you factor in Finn. You can't just say, okay, we got a new Neary and let's compare that to the cost of Finn and the cost of Neary, and that's our savings, our additional cost. We're still gonna operate Finn. So you're gonna have to be careful about how you do that computation, or you're gonna get dinged on that, I'm pretty sure.
So Kathy, is there any reason why we wouldn't just assume the cost to operate Finn wouldn't be the same exact cost it is today, unless someone can prove that the building's gonna be open more or less than it currently is now in
What
terms
else?
of number of hours?
I agree. What else could you do? So I agree.
Okay. But yes, Keith and Greg, I'm sure will be able to provide us that number just like they have for all the other buildings. So Kate, I don't know if are gonna need some time to answer Kathy's numerical question, but I think the intention here tonight was to get a vote right on which option we want you to cost estimate. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's just for what we're carrying in the estimate, which option. And then we can cost it based on that decision.
And I believe per the last sustainability meeting that Arrow Street also needs some direction for SD design as well.
So I guess I'll put it to the committee. So the sustainability committee took a motion on this already?
We did not take a motion. I think by acclamation, we're in favor of option 2, but we didn't take a specific vote.
Okay.
But they leave the vote for tonight's full committee.
All right. So you and Chris make up 2 out of 3 members of the sustainability subcommittee, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Have your positions changed as a result of any conversation tonight?
Mine is not.
Mine is not either.
Okay. So then I'll go to Kathy and Andrew. Are you ready, or what more do you need to hear in terms of providing direction for cost estimation?
Don't we need to make a decision pretty quick on this?
We do, but it's an important decision. So if there's something more you need to hear or see, then we need to just articulate it now and come back. But if we're ready, we'll take a motion on it.
I'm ready.
I think I'm okay with it. Just one clarifying question. I think we had talked about on an earlier meeting. There used to be, if we got an additional grant, that would come out of the MSBA reimbursement. But I thought that changed with that, Reduction Act kind of stuff.
Correct.
If there was a new geothermal grant that came out in the next year or so, that we could get something for this project specifically that would be beneficial to us or not. Like, could we take advantage of it, or would it basically just net out against the reimbursement?
So if grants change, unless there's requirements to those grants that would preclude the project, you could take advantage of that. So I don't think this is going to happen. Say the federal incentive increases, and as long as your project is not placed in service by a certain date, you usually can take advantage of those. But it also works the other way. If the federal incentive changes and it gets reduced, if we're not placed in service, we won't be sort of grandfathered in. So yes, whenever a new grant comes up, the MSBA, their new rule is that as long as you are not exceeding the cost, your portion of the cost, you get all of the savings from any incentive.
Okay.
But the key date is the placed in service date. Isn't that right, Kate?
For the federal programs, that is typically the key date.
Okay.
Sometimes the change in the regulation becomes a key date, but it's usually the placed in service. But it all kind of depends on how they write a new change.
Place and service is an ode, it's been around as long as I've done tax law. It's just, and Jason knows that section 48's been around forever. So place and service has always been the rule as far as capital stuff. Kate, you got the 34 because you think we're gonna issue tax exempt bonds, correct?
Correct.
What was the rate if we were issuing full bonds?
40%.
Okay.
And the difference there, Kathy, would be the interest rate we have to pay, right?
Yeah, and there are taxable bonds. You can make bonds taxable, so I think we should look at that too. Every little bit helps. So see what the difference is. I don't think it will offset this, but we might as well.
I think
Right.
Jason, I think we could vote.
All right, then I'll put a motion on the table that we support option 2, which would be the heat pump system. Is that the proper way to phrase it?
The ground source heat
source.
pump.
Ground source heat pump system.
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Roger,
Aye.
Kathy,
I
Andrew,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. All right, so hopefully that gave you the direction you need. Obviously, it would be helpful to follow up on kind of some of the numerical items.
So
just
if
Go ahead,
it's
Kate.
helpful, I can tell you, because I was like, it's not my numbers. GGD, when they did the LCCA number, they used 25.5 instead of 34% on the federal tax credit. And the reason why they're using 25.5 is because they used a base rate of 30 and then reduced for tax exempt bonds. And I used a base rate of 40 and then reduced for tax exempt bonds. The difference there is that 30% is the base rate if you don't do domestic content, but I'm anticipating that we would go for the domestic content. And so that was the difference.
So will you correct that slide, the first one, Kate, and send this one
Yep.
and that one and to the full committee, or at least to the finance subcommittee?
Right. I mean, I guess my question is, do you want the numbers to be more conservative, which is what's on that colored, that very large chart? That is more conservative. It's using
No.
the,
If we think we can get to 40, let's assume
Okay.
40, because
okay.
I think we need to show.
I agree. If you're confident we're gonna use 40 is gonna be the right starting point before you reduce for the taxes and bond defining, so use that number. And then if you could on the next one, clarify what piece of it is the lagging incentive for Massachusetts as far as it comes later, the 100.
Right, their verification. Yep.
Break that into the two parts.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Anything else for Aerostream Skanska for this evening? All right. Next agenda topic is open discussion on feedback from the select board in advisory meetings. So this is the first time we've met since that meeting. So just wanted to see if anyone had anything they want to discuss or next steps or anything along those lines. Go ahead, Kathy.
I'll say something, which is I thought that overall, the committee and the consultants and the school committee piece of it, the schools representatives did a very good job. I thought that it went very well as far as the overall presentation. So I was pretty happy with everything. I know you took some incoming from Mr. Hamilton, but that's okay because you're going to get that from others, so it's good practice. So I thought it was well done, and I thought that the detail was there that it's needed. And I don't know how many people listened, but I do think that it was a good presentation. And so I'm saying that from my select board seat, not from my committee seat.
Is your expectation from a select board seat that the next presentation we would make is once we get through the costing phase and provide an update on where we're at?
Yep. So get to select boards and advisory as far as what's going to go to town meeting.
Okay. Roger, go ahead.
So I have a question and really for, I guess, well, Kathy, Andrew, so did you feel that the amount of discussion on educational content was about right, maybe more than necessary, or maybe not enough? You know, since I'm the school committee member, I actually, well, I'll just ask the question of, kind of from your two boards.
I mean, I think from advisory was more than enough, right? I mean, we're concentrating on the costs. I know that question came up in the kinder group meeting we had the other night. They were really focused on the educational component. So I think that's definitely something we need to touch on and expand on when we go to a larger group. But from an advisory perspective, I think it's, we're just really focusing on the cost. But Kathy.
I thought, Roger, that that to me was the best part of the whole discussion. There's many good parts, but I thought that was the best part of the discussion. I thought Jason did a great job teeing everything up. I thought that the four that did the school piece were so well coordinated in the way they handed it off. I thought that part was kind of perfect. So to me, you've got a really good model going forward as far as that piece of it goes. I learned things that I didn't know and I should have known before then. So I thought that part was really, really informative.
Okay. Thanks.
In Roger, I'm going to double down on what Andrew said. I think that the portion of the population that has school-age children probably want to hear a more detailed version. Like they weren't, first of all, they weren't there for the select board advisory meeting, but I think based on what I heard from that group, they want to hear as much as they can about what the educational benefits are for the kids, which obviously are very hard to quantify in terms of a cost. And that was their feedback was we keep hearing about the cost, but what about the educational benefit? So take that for what you want. I'm sure we'll discuss it with the school committee on Wednesday night as well.
And I think a lot of the educational benefit is, basically 2 grades versus 4 and combining. I think even, also is what does a school like this do differently if, just in general, right? It's more light, it's collaborative, there's certain spaces. So not so much the 2 versus 4, but just, if this even was a two grade standalone versus the existing Neary, just the benefits of the space and the structures and how it's designed versus how it's currently being used.
Exactly. And the conversation about how a second grade teacher can now, in the coffee room, talk to the third grade teacher about someone that's coming their way because they're in the same space. I think that conversation, I thought that's a part that I really had honed in on. I get the friction between changing schools, but I really thought about the fact that teachers now, you've got 4 grades of teachers all together that can talk to each other, and it's much easier than when you've got 2 separate schools.
And I'm just going to point something out because this actually came up in a discussion with a teacher I saw in passing is let's not forget a lot of these teachers have to shift grades, as we have fluctuating enrollment. Like we have, keep me honest here, I believe we have 8 sections of 1 grade at Woodward, and Steve can probably comment on this. There's 8 sections of 1 grade at Woodward and 6 of another. So there's naturally shifting of teachers between grades, each year too. Right now, sometimes they're going between schools. They're flip-flopping between Finn or Woodward and Neary, etc. So you do see some of that too. That I should have known that, but like it's really starting to crystallize as I listen to a lot of these presentations.
It is definitely an annual conversation that we have, and definitely something that goes into some short and long-term planning as things roll along. So, Jason, I think that's 100% true.
Okay, other feedback on that part? Okay, go to public comment. I'm seeing none. We will go to meeting schedule. So our next posted meeting is Wednesday night, where we will provide an update to the Southborough School Committee. It is going to be done in a hybrid format so that you can join via Zoom if you'd like to join. There's obviously no need to join if you're not able to, but it is an opportunity to, again, make sure the school committee is up to speed on our progress. We are the second agenda item going after MCAS, so I've posted for 7 PM, but I expect it to start no earlier than 7:15 PM. And I think it'll be a lighter version of what we did with the select board and advisory. After that, unless something unexpected comes out, we won't meet again until February, which you should already have those placeholders on your calendar. Go ahead, Larry.
Jason, were you guys looking for our assistance on Wednesday night? Because I'm not sure we have it in our calendar as yet.
Not unless you really want to join another evening meeting. It's really more just to be able to answer questions from the school committee that are probably gonna be more educationally focused and less about probably some of the design elements that we focused on to date. But you're always welcome to join. It's an open public meeting, but you know, that's at least my view.
Okay, okay. We'll chat it up and see if someone, I have a commitment, but see if anyone else is available or feels the need to join.
Okay. There any other business for tonight? All right, I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Kathy?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
Chris? You're on mute, Chris. No response from Chris, and I am an aye, so we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Good evening.
Thanks all. Have a good night.